Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, May 1st. Welcome to a new month. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Look who's back. Shady is back in New York. Welcome back, Jill. Again, welcome back.
This time it's for real. All right. Well, it's great to be back on this first day of May. And with a new month, we've got a new deal for premium subscribers, right?
Yeah, so we're celebrating a year of Mo.news Premium this week. And with that, we have a special deal for all of you. So you might know that Mo.news Premium is only $7 a month or $70 a year on the annual. That's 2 months free on the annual. Well, a special deal in honor of our 1 year premium birthday, only $60 for the year. So this is $10 off the regular plan, 3.5 months free, basically, if you sign up today, mo.news/premium with the code, what else? Stay Informed. The code is Stay Informed, ED. Again, $60 for an entire year of Mo.news Premium. You get access to the premium Instagram feed, weekend news, Q&As, premium pods. You support us here at Mo.news. So a lot of reasons to do that. So again, our special running just for a couple days, an annual deal, Mo.news Premium, $60 for the whole year. Stay Informed is your code.
And speaking of staying informed, let's get to the headlines. We'll start with the campus protests across the country. Columbia calling in the NYPD after students took over a building on its campus. A different approach at Brown, where administrators and protesters have made a deal. Some health news, new guidelines about when women should start getting mammograms. To the Trump trial, a judge ordered the former president to pay $9,000 for violating a gag order. What we know about the fatal shooting of 4 officers in North Carolina. Fears of famine and genocide growing increasingly urgent in Sudan, and yet the world seems to be ignoring it. A big change coming to how the U.S. classifies marijuana, what it really means for Americans, and whoops, what happened to a cat in Utah? Don't worry, this story does have a happy ending. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, we remember today AOL Instant Messenger, which if it was around today, has a big birthday.
You've got mail. That may be the worst impression ever of the You Got Mail voice. All right, let's start with our top story once again this week, and the epicenter for the campus protests, Columbia University in New York City. As of late Tuesday night, the university called in the NYPD, which tried to secure Hamilton Hall, where protesters have locked themselves inside.
So just after 9 p.m., Jill, on Tuesday night, hundreds of NYPD called in by the university to clear out this major academic building, Hamilton Hall, who incidentally the protesters tried to rename after one of the Palestinian victims of the Israel-Hamas war. Just about 20 hours after the building had been broken into early Tuesday morning, occupied by a number of protesters. They had barricaded themselves inside, saying they would not leave unless the university acquiesced to their demands. A major escalation from the tent encampment that we've seen for nearly 2 weeks on campus. The university deciding they can't move forward this way. So late Tuesday, calling in the NYPD officers using flashbangs as distractions, basically little devices that create smoke and a little boom to distract the protesters so they could get inside the academic building. A number of the NYPD coming through a second floor window. They climbed through a second floor window to clear the building in just about 2 hours. The NYPD saying they arrested several dozen people. It's unclear how many are students and how many are outsiders. They also completely cleared out the tent encampment. All that was left as of early Wednesday morning is just tents and people's belongings, but all the protesters now clear from the tent. All the protesters now clear from the academic building that they were occupying. The university now requesting NYPD presence for the next couple of weeks to secure campus through May 17th. A reminder that graduation at Columbia is May 15th. So clearly the administrators at Columbia looking to keep campus secure through graduation. In a statement late Tuesday, Columbia officials saying, "We believe that the group that broke into and occupied the building is led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university." Sadly, this dangerous decision followed more than a week of what had been productive discussions with representatives of the lawn encampment. Keep in mind, Columbia was negotiating with these protesters. Negotiations broke down. The protesters decided to invade and occupy the building. So Columbia reaching out to the NYPD. The statement continues here. The decision to reach out to the NYPD was in response to the actions of the protesters, not the cause that they are championing. "We have made it clear," Columbia continues, "that the life of campus cannot be endlessly interrupted by protesters who violate the rules and the law." They're noting here there was a vandalizing of property, blockading of entrances. At times, they held up facilities workers for 10 minutes, one who said he was being held hostage before he was let out last night. So forcing workers out of the building. Columbia saying, clearly making a decision here that this is over. They're not putting up with this any further as they move ahead through finals and to graduation in the next couple of weeks. Several dozen protesters again involved here. The university believing it was non-Columbia students who made the decision to help them overtake the building. They controlled it for just about 20 hours, starting early on Tuesday morning. Jill, I know you've been watching some of the video of how they first took over the building.
There's tons of video on social media that shows the protesters smashing the glass doors and windows at Hamilton Hall. Then they're kind of milling about inside. Take a listen. This is someone taking a hammer to one of the glass windows. They placed wooden chairs and tables in front of the doors in what looked like an attempt to block others from entering. They also zip-tied the door handles. Hamilton Hall, by the way, has a history of student protesters taking it over. As far back as 1968, some students staged a sit-in to protest civil rights issues. Eventually, about 1,000 NYPD officers arrested the students, and the semester had to end early. Back in 1972, it was used for anti-Vietnam War protests. And then in 1985, protesters padlocked and chained Hamilton Hall as they demanded that the university divest from companies that are doing business in South Africa. A judge eventually ordered them to end the blockade after 3 weeks. Moshe is a Columbia grad. I went to grad school there. Hamilton Hall is like one of the main buildings on campus. The campus is not that big. It's in the middle of New York City. This is one of a handful of buildings where students take classes. So this is a big deal.
Yeah, I've been hearing from a number of Columbia alums throughout the day who are just shocked to see what's going on, even given the history you laid out there, that Hamilton Hall has been the site of these takeovers through the years, most of them lasting between 1 week up to 3 weeks. We should note, by the way, in that 1985 protest, the university did eventually divest from South Africa due to apartheid at the time. That's the similar demand you're seeing. Among the demands you're seeing from the protesters this go around is that they divest from Israel, though in this case, Columbia said they have no plans to divest from Israel. And so that has meant that these protesters say, we're going to stick around. We're doing this until you meet our demands. So the university has locked down access, restricted access after this break-in and occupation of the main hall. On behalf of the protesters on Tuesday, they had a spokesperson, a Columbia PhD student and teacher, addressing reporters, laying out their demands. Among them, again, they divest from Israel, that they stop suspending students. Remember, Columbia had given them an ultimatum by midday Monday to get out or start seeing suspensions. Those suspensions have begun. The protesters are demanding that suspensions end, that the university should not be suspending them for this exercise they've been engaged in for about 2 weeks. And then among the other demands they made at this press conference is that the university has to ensure that food and water gets to the protesters occupying the building. It led to some pushback from one of the reporters on site. Take a listen.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building, now would you please bring us food and water?
So you just heard there, Johanna King-Slutsky is her name, taking questions. She's a PhD candidate. She's a PhD candidate and a teacher there at Columbia, saying they're not necessarily asking the university for food and water, but they want a commitment. They'll allow food and water in. Jill, it led to interesting comments on social media, noting that these protesters put themselves in the situation and they should probably order like Grubhub or Seamless or something to the facility. There was actually a video put out earlier in the day of them raising a bucket with a rope because, again, they've locked themselves into the facility. So they had to raise food in a bucket and a rope to the second floor of the building. Anyway.
One of the reporters, I think you could hear in that clip that we played, there was a reporter who asked, like, aren't there water fountains in there? You know?
Yeah.
And they didn't answer.
Jill, just to be serious here for a second, these protesters take themselves very seriously. They believe they're engaged in a very important cause here. And they're demanding to be not only listened to, they're demanding agreement here from the university. Because remember, the university put out a statement saying, listen, we'll allow in some professors from Gaza, we'll allow in some students from Gaza. We're going to open up a conversation about the investments that we make. But for these protesters, that has not been enough. And so they take themselves very seriously at these press conferences. And that was among their demands yesterday.
And as we mentioned earlier this week, each campus is taking its own approach to these protests. So far, more than 1,000 people have been arrested at these pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel protests on at least 30 college campuses across the country. According to Axios, students who have been suspended sometimes lose access to campus housing and dining halls, and they might not be able to take their final exams. But as we could see, the threats of being suspended or expelled haven't seemed to work. It's not really dissuading a lot of the protesters.
Jill, many of these campuses saying they agree with free speech, they agree with protests. But in these cases, these students are setting up tents in areas that they're not permitted to. They're blocking other students in some cases from getting to class, blocking other students from using public spaces. They effectively have occupied these spaces and they're determining who's allowed in and who's not allowed in a public space on campus. So some of these universities not putting up with it, saying you can go do normal protests, but we'll not allow these tent encampments on our campus. You're breaking multiple rules and regulations. So some negotiating, and then others, like University of Florida, which has now threatened to ban students from campus for 3 years for engaging in this. They were very clear with the students down there in Gainesville, and it led to several arrests on Monday, 9 people total in Florida. They were charged with failure to obey a lawful command, as well as in some cases resisting arrest. One person allegedly charged with battery for spitting on a police officer. A spokesperson for the University of Florida said the university again had provided ample warning regarding these prohibited activities, setting up these tent encampments, and the statement was pretty notable. The statement reads, Jill, the University of Florida is not a daycare, and we do not treat protesters like children. They knew the rules, they broke the rules, and they'll face the consequences. So that's the University of Florida. They're taking an approach that you saw at Arizona State, at UT Austin, et cetera, where again, they're like, listen, we're okay with free speech, we're not okay with hate speech, and we're not okay with you breaking our rules and regulations and setting up these encampments. At the same time, on some other campuses, particularly these Ivy League campuses, a lot more deferential, a lot more negotiation. At Brown University, they struck a deal, demonstrators agreeing to dismantle their encampment after university leaders, and this is the first year, said they will discuss and vote on potentially divesting funds from companies connected to the Israeli military campaign in Gaza. So it's unclear how that vote will go, but Brown University has agreed to take a vote based on the demands of the protesters, and so they're declaring victory, the protesters up there at Brown University in Rhode Island on that front.
Another quick note, we could be in for another fiery exchange on Capitol Hill. The House Education and Workforce Committee Chair, Virginia Foxx, she said that she's going to be holding another hearing, this one on May 23rd. It's called calling for accountability, stopping anti-Semitic college chaos. And on the invite list, the presidents of Michigan, Yale, and UCLA. Not clear at this point if they will be attending.
Yeah, and we should also note that Ginny Fox, the congresswoman there, also sent a letter yesterday to the Metropolitan Police, to D.C. Police, after it's clear that D.C. Police rejected requests from George Washington University in D.C. GW had called the police saying, please clear out the tent encampment on our campus. And D.C. Police said, no, we don't need to clear this out. We think this is a bad look, and they refused the request from the university. So Congress getting involved in, remember, DC is sort of unique because it has in times congressional oversight. So now you have Congress asking some questions of the DC police as to why they're not responding to the request of a local university.
Now to some health news. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force is out with some new guidelines about when women should start getting mammograms. And that age is 40 years old. The guidelines recommend that mammograms start at 40. And the task force is also urging women to get screened every other year. So this is a decade earlier than the previous age, which was at 50. The new recommendation applies to women who are at average risk of breast cancer. Until now, women in their 40s have been encouraged to have a conversation with their healthcare provider about when they should start mammograms based on their personal risks. In case you're not familiar, mammograms are an X-ray image of the breasts. And the bottom line here, Moshe, is that doctors and health experts say that they realize that mammograms are a very reliable way to detect breast cancer. And as you know, with most cancers and most viruses, mostly anything, the earlier it is caught, the easier it is to treat.
Yeah, you've been seeing this with a bunch of cancers in recent years, screening, getting younger and younger as you see younger and younger people suffering from various cancers. So these task force recommendations that came out in the last day are considered the gold standard because they're based on a thorough review of evidence based on the independent group of experts. We should note that right now, most private health insurers cover annual mammograms under the Affordable Care Act, under Obamacare, so they're free to patients. According to the CDC, breast cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death among women. About 42,000 women and 500 men die of breast cancer every year. One of the researchers behind the new recommendation tells NPR that they're changing the guidelines because, again, they're seeing the rise in breast cancer among people in their 40s. And it's really across the board that cancer rates are climbing in young people. Data shows that cancer diagnosis jumped nearly 13% over the last 20 years for people under 50. And that's the U.S. Around the world, we're seeing much of the same thing in terms of increased rates. And so now with these recommendations, several medical groups have breast cancer screening recommendations that are all in line here. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends that women at average risk of breast cancer should get a mammogram every 1 to 2 years, beginning at age 40. So these new recommendations now in line with that.
So Moshe, I can tell you on Long Island, most people I know, most women are recommended to get mammograms at 35 and even sonograms. So I have been getting mammograms and sonograms since I'm 35, possibly because the rate of breast cancer on Long Island is so incredibly high. I think it's like 1 in 8 women on Long Island have breast cancer.
Yeah, I mean, environmental factors certainly play into this. Of course, genetic factors play into this as well. But a heads up to all of you, especially if you're now at even average risk, is to begin mammograms at age 40.
All right, time for the speed read. Let's start with a quick update on the Trump criminal trial. The judge presiding over Donald Trump's hush money case on Tuesday held the former president in criminal contempt over a series of posts on Truth Social. The judge said the posts violated a gag order, which prohibits any attacks on jurors and witnesses. He warned Trump that further violations could lead to jail time. Prosecutors from the Manhattan DA's office accused Trump of violating New York Judge Juan Merchan's April 1st order at least 10 times since it went into effect. But the judge found that there were 9 violations and fined Trump $9,000.
Yeah, so the judge trying to prove a point here, even though he acknowledges that Trump is a billionaire, that $9,000 is a drop in the bucket for him. But he wants to reinforce to Trump that some of his posts will not be tolerated by this court. In this case, he posted a few times on his Truth Social account about how Michael Cohen, his former attorney, Stormy Daniels are both, quote, sleazebags. Another post appeared to quote a Fox News personality, Jesse Waters, in saying that there's undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get to the Trump jury. The feeling here from the court is that, Trump has a huge following, a huge social media following, and that he's trying to impact the trial here and push the jury in a certain way, which the judge is not going to tolerate. So we'll watch this. I mean, the judge saying, listen, I'll put you behind the bars for this sort of behavior. The question is whether Trump will take that threat seriously and whether the judge will follow through on that warning. Still, the judge ordering Trump to take down those True Social posts, even though they're sort of out there at this point. And this is not the first time Trump, in one of his civil trials, was fined about $15,000 for violating a gag order, again, trying to push the judge and a jury in a certain direction by criticizing things on his very large social media platform.
From the New York Times, fears of renewed ethnic slaughter in the Sudanese region of Darfur. This region may sound familiar. 2 decades ago, as many as 300,000 people were killed there. That ethnic slaughter in Darfur was the focus of global attention. The worst atrocities were committed by the Janjaweed, a group of ethnic Arab fighters that later evolved into the Rapid Support Forces. They're back and they're targeting Black tribes again. Officials once again warning about mass bloodshed and famine in the region. It comes as a battle is looming for the last city that is being held by Sudan's military in Darfur. It is the city of El Fasher. It is the latest flashpoint in a year-old civil war between Sudan's military and that group, the Rapid Support Forces, a powerful Arab paramilitary group that the Sudan military once nurtured, but they are now bitter rivals as they battle for power. Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. envoy to the UN, told reporters on Monday that the city was, quote, on the precipice of a large-scale massacre.
What we've been watching unfold in Sudan over the last year is effectively a fight between the former president and the former vice president, once allies. They each have their own militias, and they've been fighting it out, leading to mass displacement, now mass famine, and concerns here about a growing genocide in the region. These two individuals were involved in the Darfur genocide that we've been talking about for a couple of decades now. According to Reuters, nearly 5 million people in Sudan are now close to famine as the civil war passes the 1-year mark. Aid officials say that the warring parties are looting or blocking aid in many areas where starvation is now taking hold, and yet what they call the world's largest hunger crisis is drawing very little global attention. There's a lack of media coverage, lack of access down there, and really just lack of attention from NGOs and most countries around the world. El Fasher, where we're watching this potential battle unfold here, is the former capital of the Kingdom of Darfur. It has about 2 million inhabitants, hundreds of thousands who fled earlier waves of fighting, but now are facing this renewed fighting. And this is the last obstacle for the Rapid Support Forces to dominate the region. Jill, we've been seeing this in a number of African countries and frankly across the region. Yemen is effectively 2 countries now. Libya is 2 countries now. Somalia is 2 countries now. And the sense is that Sudan could be going in that direction of effectively having 2 battling governments, 2 regions, as the civil war continues to escalate.
From NBC News, authorities on Tuesday identified the suspect in the killing of 4 law enforcement officers who were shot trying to serve him a warrant in Charlotte, North Carolina. The suspect is 39-year-old Terry Clark Hughes Jr. He was killed in an exchange of gunfire Monday after he allegedly fired a high-powered rifle at a U.S. Marshals task force that included local law enforcement officers. He also injured 4 other officers in the shootout before he was fatally shot in the front yard of the home where officers had attempted to serve him. The 4 law enforcement officers that were killed, Sam Paluch, who's 42 years old, 46-year-old William Alden Elliott. They were both 14-year veterans with the North Carolina Department of Adult Correction. And then there is Deputy U.S. Marshal Thomas Weeks Jr. and Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Officer Joshua Ayer.
Yeah, Jill, such a tragedy, losing those 4 law enforcement officers and 4 more injured in this. Hughes apparently has a lengthy criminal history dating back more than a decade. As of the raid, he was wanted on several warrants in numerous counties for failing to appear in court, drug charges, gun charges, a whole variety of things. Again, a tragedy there that they're mourning right now, the loss of those officers down there in North Carolina.
From the Associated Press, the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA, will move to loosen restrictions on marijuana in what would be a historic shift in federal drug policy. This is according to people familiar with the matter. The measure, if enacted, would not instantly legalize marijuana at the federal level, but it could broaden access to the drug for medicinal use and also boost cannabis industries in states where it's legal. The White House Office Management and Budget must review the proposal. The measure, if accepted, would only go into effect months after the public has a chance to comment on the plan. So marijuana is currently classified as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD. So this would move marijuana to Schedule III alongside ketamine and some steroids.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, Jill, the contrast, right, between all the states that have legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes and for recreational use in recent years. Now, 38 states have legalized medicinal marijuana, 24 states, half the union. It's legal for recreational use. Yet federally, as of right now, it's still considered as bad, as illegal as heroin and LSD. But clearly the feds here slowly moving in the direction you've seen the states individually move. The U.S. marijuana industry now worth about $30 billion. It's raised a whole bunch of tax revenue across the country as you've seen states open up here legally. They're seeing a lot of cash. They're seeing a lot of cash come in. Biden called for a review of federal marijuana law back in 2022 and has moved to pardon thousands of Americans who were convicted federally of just possessing marijuana. So this doesn't decriminalize it, but again, makes it a Schedule III drug. And already across the U.S., Jill, you didn't really see the feds prosecuting this or enforcing the federal law, especially in all these states where marijuana has become legal.
And the timing here is also important. It is an election year, and this does seem to poll well.
Jill, if you're a joker, a smoker, or a midnight toker, this might make you vote for Biden. A Gallup poll found last fall, actually, that 70%, 7 in 10 Americans now support legalization as the highest number ever recorded. It's doubled over the last 20 years as we've seen this open up. So, interesting moves. You should always watch stuff in an election year. Clearly, that's not lost on the White House here. But again, several White Houses have been talking about this now, going back to Trump, going back to Obama, as the country has been moving in this direction.
And finally, a story handpicked from our newsletter producer, Lauren. This is from NBC News. A couple accidentally shipped their pet cat when sending an Amazon return, stunning a warehouse worker. This Utah couple was perplexed, get it? Pun intended.
We get it.
When their shy, stop saying it. Okay. When their shy cat, Galena, mysteriously went missing on April 10th, her owners could not figure out how this indoor cat could just disappear without a trace. A week later, Carrie Clark, the owner, got a notification that Galena's microchip had been scanned. And they were soon on a call with a vet in Los Angeles, about 630 miles away. So their 6-year-old cat survived for 6 days without food or water after she was accidentally shipped in a 3-by-3-foot cardboard box filled with shoes that were being returned to Amazon.
So we're told that Galena the cat loves playing in boxes and hiding. Clearly what happened here, the owner suspects Galena jumped inside the box when he left to fetch some tape to seal it up. The Amazon employee told Clark over the phone that she took care of the cat before taking her to the vet the next day. An exam revealed she was not injured, had a regular temperature, was only mildly dehydrated despite this despite this journey. And they believe 2 factors here might have helped the cat survive this being shipped in an Amazon box. First, a seam on the box had come unglued, allowing oxygen to circulate. And second, mild weather in the area it was being shipped prevented her from either overheating or freezing inside the box. So Clark and her husband booked the flight from Utah to California to reunite with Galena after they got the call. And they do say she's a bit skinnier, but unharmed. And it's a good reminder here, folks, if you don't already do so, to microchip your pets. Allows you to track wherever they are Apparently it just goes in the back of their shoulder blades.
All I keep thinking about is that song, The Cat Came Back. I thought he was a goner, but the cat came back. Is that like, I'm Googling it and it looks like it's from 1894.
Well, it's also a kid's song, right? It's been
guess.
remade as like a kid song, like Lori Berkner.
Moshe, I think that leads us pretty nicely to On This Day.
On this day in history, Galena the cat was found in an Amazon box.
The
Folks,
cat came
just
back.
double check the box before you tape it up in the future. If you have small children or if you have pets. Anyway, on this day in history, on this May 1st, 13 years ago, on this day, Sunday night, it was 2011, President Obama announces the death of Osama bin Laden during a U.S. commando operation. Because of the time difference, technically they got him May 2nd in Pakistan. It was May 1st in the U.S. It ended a 10-year manhunt after 9/11. They'd gotten a bunch of senior leaders, but Osama had gotten on the loose, had gone to Pakistan. Eventually, they get him. Jill, we've had former CIA Director Mike Morrell on this podcast before. He was briefing President Bush on 9/11, also happened to be a deputy CIA director on the day they got bin Laden. He was talking about in the Situation Room. He was asked their confidence that he was asked for his confidence that bin Laden was where they thought he was. And he said he was at 40% at the time, that like Obama ultimately makes the call to go there. But a number of them weren't sure that this was bin Laden, that this could have been a major international incident, an issue with the Pakistanis, and Obama makes that call, notably Vice President Biden at the time. Now he's gone back on this, but the belief is at that time, he was also among those saying, I'm not sure you should go for it. And Obama ends up going for it. Now Biden says, no, I was totally into it.
Like Biden, it's on the record. It's like everyone was there and heard you say it.
But now he's president and But now he's president, and they don't want him to look wrong on that. Anyway, all right, a couple other items we want to mention on this day before we go. Turning 93 years old today, Empire State Building. 102 stories. It was the tallest building in the world for almost 40 years. It was the tallest building in the world for about 40 years. It opened on this day in 1931 in New York City. All right, a bit of tech news here. Jill, pour one out for AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, born on this day in 1997. For many of us, Gen Xers, millennials, it was our main form of communication there, circa 97 to 2003, 2004, before GChat, Gmail really became a thing. Verizon would eventually acquire AOL, and 20 years in, AIM gets shut down in 2017. But those first 10 years before free texting, social media, you'd leave up an away message. It was that AIM, a lot of important moments.
So up until a few years ago, up until it actually got shut down, a lot of traders used instant message. They still use that as a way to communicate.
Jill, it was my only form of communication on 9/11 from DC when the phones got shut down. My mother still has printed out my instant message sending her once I evacuated the Capitol that day saying like, hey, Mom, I'm okay.
Deb.
Yeah, Debs has my AAM from that day. All right, we end here with a bit of pop culture movie history. On this day in 1941, considered to be one of the greatest films ever made, Citizen Kane by Orson Welles premiered. And one other iconic pop culture item, about 60 years later, Destiny's Child releases Survivor on this day in 2001. Jill, this was a big album. Gave us Survivor, gave us Independent Woman, gave us Bootylicious.
Moshe, Survivor was on my marathon playlist. I had a playlist of songs that would just get me through those last few miles of a grueling 26.2 marathon.
Kelly, Michelle, and Beyonce getting Jill across the finish line.
And we are at the finish line of this podcast. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Yes, and a reminder, again, we have a special deal for Mo News Premium, so go check it out right now, mo.news/premium. The code is STAYINFORMED. You get 3.5 months off, $60 for the entire year of Mo News Premium to support what we're doing. Get access to our premium pod and our premium Instagram account.
All right, bye, everyone.
Later.